right. Ngithanda ukuthatha leli thuba ngibingelele ama-Wesley Guild ase-Natal West Synod nabo bonke ababukele emakhaya ngegama leNkosi yethu uJesu Kristu kuze kube phakade amen. Igama lami nguLuyanda wakaMathe. I am a full member of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. I am also a member in good standing under Wesley Guild yakwa Nongoma Seket 721. I've had the honor of being invited by the Natal West Synod Executive to do a presentation on femicide and mental health. So, structure sami sizoma kanjena today for my presentation. I'm going to be looking at the definition of femicide. I'm going to be looking at how we understand and how we try and look at femicide from a psychological point of view. And then lastly, I'm going to try and elaborate on izinto that we can do as abantu abasha, as citizens of South Africa to eradicate or to decrease femicide emzansi. So firstly, just by looking at the definition of femicide, into yokuqala ebalekile ekufanele siyazi is that the definition of femicide according to United Nations is the killing of women and girls because they are women and girls. So abantu besifazane basuke bebulawelwa ukuthi bangabantu besifazane. That's a femicide. So inkinga ye femicide is a worldwide phenomenon. It's a worldwide pandemic. But for the sake of my presentation, I'll try and narrow it down to a context yase South Africa ukuze sizokwazi ukuthi si understand within a context esiphila kuyona. Right. So ama-stats from South African Police Services asitshela ukuthi after every 3 hours umuntu wesifazane eSouth Africa is killed. And then recently uma ngabe sikade simuzwa nopresident wethu, he did say that indaba yokubulawa kwabantu besifazane nodlame against abantu besifazane has become a huge pandemic in South Africa. So I think that is why kufanele singabantu abasha sazi and siqaphele wonke ama-symptoms, zonke impawu ezilidele ekuthenini kuze kugcine sekubulawe umuntu wesifazane. Alright, njengoba bese ngishilo ukuthi ukubulawa kwabantu besifazane it's a huge phenomenon in South Africa. Ama-stats again asitshela ukuthi abantu or the majority of people who commit femicide abantu besilisa. So today, for the sake of my presentation, I'll also zoom in specifically on indaba yabantu besilisa nokuba nodlame nokubulala abantu besifazane and how we can possibly prevent that. Uma ngabe ke sikhuluma nge-femicide asibheki kuphela abantu besifazane sebekhulile, sibheka namantombazane abade sengishilo, sibheka namantombazane abancane asakhula. Because every day we hear of cases of young girls and women being killed, and it seems like it's happening more and more frequently. And unfortunately, in South Africa, njoba kade sine street lockdown, there was a huge increase against violence for abantu besifazane. So there was a huge increase on femicide, on GBV as well. Kusho ukuthi ngempela inkinga noma indaba yokubulawa kwabantu besifazane, it's become a huge problem in South Africa. So now what I would like us to focus on manje is from a psychological point of view, indaba ye femicide, how do we analyze it and how do we understand it? Ukuze sikwazi ukuthi sikwazi uku-intervene, sikwazi ukuthi lehle izinga lokubulawa kwabantu besifazane. One of the things esiyayisebenzise is i-model ekuthiwa i-ecological model. I-ecological model, again, it's one of the approaches of psychology that look at the individual, that look at a family, that look at a community, that look at a society to try and understand inkinga esuke ibhekene nomuntu noma isuke ibhekene nomphakathi ngaleso sikhathi. So first of all, because ngithe abantu abaningi who commit femicide abantu besilisa. So when we focus or when we look at individuals according to the ecological model, one of the things esiyibonayo uma ngabe sibheka abantu besilisa is abantu besilisa ibona isikhathi esiningi abaphuzayo ukuthola usizo lwezengqondo. Ibona abane low access to mental health care. Ibona abaphuzayo ukdiagnoswa with mental illnesses. And so kwenza ukuthi banganakeki if they have any problems the mental illness, if they have any issues with the mood, if they are violent, if they are aggressive, kwenza ukuthi kunganakeki because aba-access early as soon as possible i-treatment ukuze bakwazi ukuthola usizo. Now there's a number of things esidala lokhu, and I'll touch on them, such as a family, such as a community, such as a society, because obviously siyazi ukuthi indlela esesiframe ngakhona i-mental illness, it's very, very negative emphakathini, which is contributing to i-delay yokuthi abantu besilisa basheshe bathole usizo lwezengqondo ukuze bakwazi ukusizakala. Enye into ke futhi eyinkinga kakhulu ukuthi sesithathe isitayela sokuthi uma ngabe sinama issues mhlambe sibe nama unhealthy kuthiwa ama-unhealthy coping mechanisms. So esikhundleni sokuthi umuntu mhlambe let's say uma ngabe angry noma kukhona into emphathe kabi akwazi mhlambe ukuthi ehlise umoya ayifundise ukuthi angasheshi ukucasuka, we do things eziqhubayo leyo behavior leyo, such as drinking alcohol, such as taking drugs. Now mawubheka ama cases amaningi e-femicide, abantu abaningi basuke bethi mhlawumbe I wasn't sober, I was under the influence of alcohol, I was under influence of drugs, plus nemood yakhe umuntu uthola ukuthi vele ube angry, ube irritated, and so mangabe esekuperisha with this unhealthy coping mechanisms bese kuyanda umuntu asagcina ethatha isinqumo sokuthi azakhiphe umphefumulo womuntu wesifazane. Enye into ke ebalekile individually uma ngabe sibheka according to the ecological model, kubalekile kakhulu ukuthi ama beliefs ethu siwashintshe njengamanje, kakhulukazi ke ngoba thina singabantu abasha and we have access to information. We know now ukuthi akekho umuntu onelungelo lokuphatha impilo yomunye umuntu, you know. That's one thing as individuals ekufanele sitshele yona ukuthi whether you're in a relationship nomunye umuntu, whether nobudlelwano obuthize, ngabe u-cousin, ngabe usisi, ngabe uyini, you don't have a right to control impilo yomuntu, because ezinye zezinto as ama-individuals esidala ukuthi sibe violent and aggressive ukuthi we tend to think we owe impilo yomunye umuntu. Ingakho abantu besifazane uthola ukuthi when they're in a relationship babe violated, babe abused, because there's this belief ukuthi if ukuthi ngumuntu wesilisa I am the head and therefore I own everyone, mhlambe let's say under indlu yami, or everyone I'm in a relationship with. Let us stop lawo beliefs, because they tend to give us a sense of behavior wrong engafanele siqhube ukuthi ngisho ngawukhipha umphefumulo kaSibanibani vele she's my wife, vele she's my daughter, etc, etc. So that's one way of looking at indaba edala i-femicide kakhulukazi eMzansi masibheka ama-individuals. And then we move on to i-family. Maningi kakhulu ama-roles adlalwa i-family ekuthenini kuqhubezele indaba yokubulawa abantu besifazane. First things, into esiyaziyo ngicabanga ukuthi majority yethu mhlawumbe esikhuliswe ngayo, kunale belief yokuthi iy'ngane zabafana yizona ekufanele ithole inhlonipho kakhulu ukudlula kwezamantombazane, despite age, but as long as igender nje kuwumuntu wesilisa kufanele yena ahlonishwe, and then lo wentombazane noma lo wesifazane is below lo wesilisa. That is a huge problem, because into esibonayo manje abantu besilisa, like I said, bakhula nalento yokuthi they have a control over whoever owesifazane osempilweni yabo, which influences indlela aba-behavior ngayo. Unfortunately, kusuka kudala ekuthenini kwazeke ukuthi ifamily ikhulise abantwana according to ama-gender, owesilisa uzoba phezulu, owesifazane abe ngaphansi. So one of the things we have to focus on as ama-families manje is to make sure ukuthi zonke iy'ngane zethu sizikhuliswa equally, we instill the same values ey'nganeni zethu, and then we make sure ukuthi ziyarespectana equally. Akekho ozoba higher than omunye because of i-gender. So enye into futhi ebalulekile ukuthi umuntu ukhuliswe ekhaya elinjani. Now, despite ukuthi mhlampe you are a Christian, kuyaye kube khona nje nama-beliefs ekhaya ukuthi impilo fanele siphile kanjani. Wonke lawo ma-beliefs they contribute ekuthenini umuntu ukhula ayibone kanjani i-relationship yakhe nabantu besifazane. Uma ngabe for example kuzokholelwa ekuthenini umfana akakhali, uyayibona into kanjalo, umfana is not allowed to express ama-emotions akhe. That type of upbringing izofosterisha ekuthenini umuntu uma ngabe esenama-feelings abuhlungu ekufanele ngabe wa-expressa in a normal healthy way, abese wa-expressa in an unhealthy way. Lento ade ngiyisho ukuthi sikhula nalama unhealthy coping mechanisms, and isikhathi esiningi lezo zinto lezo zisuke iqale kuphi, zisuke iqale emndenini esikhulele kuyona, zisuke ziqalele kuma-beliefs esinawo, into ekanjalo. So one of the things again that we have to consider is to allow iy'ngane emakhaya, to allow ourselves as well ukuthi sikwazi uku-expressa ama-emotions ethu in a healthy way. Akekho umuntu ekuzothiwa yena akangabi sad ngoba nakhu i-gender yakhe kufanele ibe strong, uyayibona into kanjalo, or akangabi hurt ngoba uma ngabe hurt umuntu ukhombisa i-weakness. Wonke lawo ma-beliefs they instill into e-negative kumuntu ukuthi no, mhlampe ukuze ngempela ngiyi-prove ukuthi I am a tough person, kufanele ngize ngenze something that's extreme, which then ends up turning into femicide, which ends up turning into gender-based violence. And I think siyakubona kakhulu lokho emakhaya ukuthi abantu besilisa ngoba kade ngisho nje ukuthi sikhule kuthiwa hayi no akakhali umuntu wesilisa akakwazi ukuba sensitive. The question then is, lawo ma-feelings uwashonsaphi and ukhopha kanjani ngawo? We must always ask ourselves that. That's why uma ngabe sephuma aphume in an unhealthy way, uthola ukuthi umuntu ke is very aggressive manje because akakwazi ukudila in a healthy way with ama-feelings akhe. Useyabulala, useyarape, useba abusive, zonke lezo zinto negative. So as families, kumele siwaqaphele ama-beliefs ethu, kumele siyiqaphele nezinto esiyishoyo, and most importantly asikhuliseni abantwana bethu equally. Despite i-gender, despite ukuthi umuntu uyintombazane noma umfana, we need to ensure ukuthi iy'ngane zethu zikhula zazi ukuthi ziyalingana, zifanele ihloniphane, futhi sifanele zitreatane ngendlela e-right. One of the things ngiyibone kakhulu is we also have to remind ourselves of ama-roles esiwadlalayo kwi-family nje nasemphakathini ke, although I'll still touch on e-community as well. Ukuthi we know ukuthi abantu besifazane they are nurturers, they're supposed to take care of us and all of that, and then abantu besilisa they're supposed to be the protectors in the family. So now why is it that the protectors have now turned against everyone else? Why femicide sekuyinto esiyande kakhulu and kuyinto eyenziwa abantu besilisa eSouth Africa? That's another question we need to ask ourselves. All right, and then moving on to e-community. Unfortunately, sikhula ema-community angafani, and one of the things eziyinkinga kakhulu emphakathini yethu is the normalization of violence. Ukuthi nje kuvumelekile ukuthi let's say mhlambe uma ngabe kuzwakala ukuthi kamakhelwane ubaba wakhona is physically abusing uma wakhona, si-community sovele sinje cha asingeni leyo nto leyo, uyabo iyababila ingene. or hayi uzama ukuqinisa umuzi wakhe usibanibani. That's why he's physically abusing unkosikazi wakhe. Because one of the things that's problematic about that is physical abuse often tends to femicide. Umuntu uqala ngokumshaya, mhlawumbe uqala ngokumshaya, lokhu abuser, and then one day you take it too far and you end up killing someone. And most of the times lezo zinto kuyaye kuthiwa ubenzeni, uyabo ezembulalo, ubenzeni noma asingeni, uyayibona lonto leyo. That is basically normalizing behavior unhealthy, behavior engafanele ngabe sayinormalizer siwumphakathi. Nanokuthi nje even if umuntu violent, aggressive, kuyaye kuthiwe hayi ucasukile, you know. But then there's another way of dealing with the frustration that is healthy. Awukwazi ukuthi ubone ukuthi uthatha isinqumo sokuthi you beat up someone else or you harass someone else. So unfortunately ke siwumphakathi sesikujwayele kakhulu ukuthi nje into ye-violence siyenze ibe normally, sizibe futhi mangabe siyibona yenzeka, because apparently no one wants to interfere ey'nkingeni zabantu, or no one wants to participate, or no one wants to get in between abanye abantu. But one of the things I'm going to touch on is that the importance of reinforcing indaba yokuthi we need to protect each other. We need to make sure ukuthi abantu are not using i-anger yabo to harass abanye abantu, because there's easier ways of coping with the anger, besides violence and besides killing yabantu besifazane namantombazane amancane. Right, lastly, according to ecological model, another aspect esingayibuka is society at large. Now, with a society at large, as South Africans, we know ukuthi sikhule kakhulu ngey'khathi zodlame, we're exposed to colonization, we're exposed to apartheid, and so there was a lot of trauma as exposed kuwona. And unfortunately, njengoba kade ngisho ukuthi uma ngabe singama-families, izinto ekanjalo, we tend to pass them on. Ukuthi nje yonke into fanele sisolve nge-violence, fanele nje sibe nje, you know, strong, angry people ukuze izinto zethu zilunge. That has come to bite us manje as South Africans, indaba yokuba exposed with trauma ne-violence nje kusukela kudala kuze kube manje, because now abantu, they think violence is always the one thing abazosolva ngayo i-problem. Yes, kufanele sikhipe in mind ukuthi we have a lot of trauma, and isikhathi esiningi njengoba ngisho nje ukuthi abantu, they don't seek help in order to deal with lezo zinto lezo in a healthy way. And so uthola ukuthi njengoba ngisho nje seyiphuma in an unhealthy manner, and abantu sebeqala ukubulalana, baqala ukulimazana and all of that. So yes, as a country, as a South African country, as a South African as a country, yes, we are, or we have been exposed with a lot of trauma. And mhlambe nalokho sekucontribute ekuthenini even indlela esiparenta ngayo singazi ukuthi yini kahle kahle indlela healthy yokuthi sidile ngama emotions ethu. Uyabo, sikhule under udlame, we've been exposed to so much violence growing up that that's the only way we know. So we have to keep that in mind. But now we do have options. I'm very happy ukuthi I'm talking to relatively young people who are now exposed to information, who are now exposed to knowledge, and they know ukuthi violence is not the way to go. They know ukuthi it's important ukuthi sikhulisa abantwana bethu equally, whether umuntu wesilisa or wesifazane, we must all respect each other. We must instill ama values ukuthi umuntu has a right to express ama emotions akhe in a healthy way. Uma ngabe umuntu sad, uma ngabe umuntu efuna ukukhala, uma ngabe umuntu kubuhlungu inhliziyo for whatever reason, kufanele lo muntu adedele ukuthi express. Ngoba like I said, the question is, if ukuthi uyamvimbela umuntu based on their gender, the question is where or how do they deal with those emotions? Usually ke njengoba sesibona nje ukuthi they tend to come out in an unhealthy way. umuntu abe ne-anger emangalisayo gcine selimaza noma esebulala omunye umuntu. And I think that's a huge problem in South Africa. Just to summarize, I touched briefly on ecological model to try and understand femicide in South African context. I looked at the individual, lapho sisuke sibheka khona indlela wena as umuntu odila ngayo ngama emotions akho, nanokuthi isikhathi esiningi abantu besilisa they've had very low access to mental health, and so that's one of the things that has become a problem kakhulu in South Africa, ukuthi abantu besilisa they are exposed very late to mental health as a reason abalutholi usizo kusase early. Nanokuthi okwesibili kufanele sifundise indlela yokuthi si-express in a positive way ama-emotions ethu. Akekho umuntu onelungelo lokuthi ashaye omunye umuntu or alimaze omunye umuntu or abulale omunye umuntu just because they are angry. There are healthier ways of dealing with anger, there are healthier ways of dealing with the sadness. And I wish ukuthi abantu besilisa kakhulu South Africa will give themselves the opportunity nje to go and seek mental health care as soon as they can. Uma ngabe uyibona, you know yourself as a person ukuthi no, ingathi I'm not coping well with a particular situation. Seek help. There's always someone willing to listen, there's always someone willing to help, a professional, somebody. Then ngatouch briefly on a family as well. Ukuthi kubalekile ukuthi ingane zethu sikhulise ngendlela efanele. Ayikho manje indaba yokuthi ngoba nakho umfana wena you can't express ama emotions akho. Wena sekufanele ufihle ukuthi you are feeling vulnerable, you are feeling sad. That should stop, because now we know better. We know that everyone is entitled to expressing our emotions akhe. And then I touched briefly again on a community, indaba yokuthi as a community nje in general sesijwayezile ukuthi si-normalize violence. Kufanele nje yonke into nje yethu iphenduka udlame, whether it's relationships, uma ngabe ningaboni ngasolinye kuthiwa bayashayana nani, and no one is going to bother to intervene into kanjalo. And I touched nje kakhulu ekuthenini indaba ye-physical abuse, it often tends to a femicide. Kuqala kancane, kuqala ngakho vele ukuthi now umuntu umshaye, and then you end up taking that person's life. So we need to be careful about that. We need to not normalize lezo zinto lezo as a community nje emphakathini. And then ngase ngitouch briefly ukuthi i-society as well esikhulele kuyona noma esibe exposed kuyona also plays a huge role in terms of dealing with situations esibhekana nawo. We have, like I said, been exposed to a lot of violence as South Africans. We have been exposed to a lot of trauma, and unfortunately most of us never got a chance to deal with naleyo trauma, and so we've carried it around for so long, sayidlulisa from generation to generation, which has become a huge problem, because manje sekuyavela ukuthi no, there's probably a lot of anger kubantu, and indlela abakhipha ngayo is not healthy, which is why people are killing each other, people are raping each other. There's too much aggression, because asikaze sidile nezinye izinto esidlule kuzo singabantu as a society in South Africa. Right. So nje briefly, ngoba kade ngisho nje ukuthi ke i-mental health ibalekile kakhulu. Ngiyazi ukuthi isikhathi esiningi asijwayelanga kakhulukazi singabantu abamnyama. It's a new concept to us, but we do owe it to ourselves to give it a chance. Just like umzimba wakho uyakwazi ukunakekela physically, you are able to go to the doctor uma ugula uyojova, uthatha amaphilisi, uthatha umuthi. Same thing applies to your mind, to your brain. You need to be able to take care of ingqondo yakho, you need to be able to take care of your emotions, and that's where mental health comes in. Now, a lot of us bahlala isikhathi eside with inkinga ezisiqilaza emqondweni, and that ends up affecting us negatively. It's either we become really angry, really aggressive, and we end up doing izinto enjengo femicide, enjengo gender-based violence. So issue of mental health, singabantu abamnyama, I would like us to be, open to it. Take care of your mind, take care of your emotions. Ikakhulukazi-ke because now ngoba bese ngishilo ekuqaleni ukuthi we are exposed to a lot of knowledge manje esikakhulukazi singabantu abasha. We should know better ukuthi uma ngabe ungaphathekile kahle, it means there's something wrong. And if you feel like, no, I'm not dealing with my emotions in a positive way, then you seek help. You go to someone who's ozokusiza to cope with whatever you're facing. Another thing, unfortunate kakhulu, as a society, kakhulukazi the black society, indlela esidefine ngayo i-mental illness is very negative. I once saw someone owafika nje ofisini lami ezongibona. The first thing ayisho mangabe ngene office, and I hadn't said anything, ngagcina nje ngokumbingelela wathi nje I should say ngiyahlanya ke mina mase ngizobona psychologist. And that is very unfortunate. We don't deal with crazy, we deal with health. Ayikho indaba yokuthi mangabe uzobona psychologist kushuthi mhlawumbe usaphilile kahle ekhanda or mhlawumbe uyahlanya nanani, which is indlela esesidefine ngayo thina i-mental health care. Uma ngabe uzobona psychologist, uma ngabe uzobona i-counselor, usuke uzofuna usizo about how to cope with whatever you are facing. And kuyakusiza kakhulu lokho because you are able to handle whatever challenges ezivelayo empilweni yakho ngendlela efanele. The reason abantu begcina bebulala abantu besifazane nezingane is because a lot of them are not aware of ama-issues abanawo. There's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of anger. Umuntu akaka-address lokho, uma kuphuma ngendlela engafanele. Thola ukuthi umuntu is now a rapist, angry nje for whatever reason. And that's because unfortunately singabantu abamnyama ikakhulukazi we don't deal with ama-issues aphathelene ne-mental illness. Okubalulekile kakhulu, i-mental illness akusho ukuthi uyahlanya, it's just another ukugula. Ake ngisho kanjalo, ukugula nje kufana nakho konke ukugula physically. Nakho you can take medication if you need medication, and you can get therapy, you can get counseling, and you can be able to deal with my issues in a healthy way. We've been exposed to a lot of trauma. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of killings and all of that. And so uma ngabe sikubeka lokho ngaphakathi nakho kuyas-affecta negatively, which is where mental health care comes in. Ukuthi we try and help you cope with whatever challenges that you're facing. And so ngiya-encourage kakhulu ukuthi we seek help. Ikakhulukazi abantu besilisa, again I'm just going to push this as much as I can. Abantu besilisa need to expose themselves to mental health care. Ayikho indaba yokuthi if you go to a psychologist mhlambe usuphambene ekhanda. That is a myth and that is a lie. You go because they are healthcare providers, just like odokotela, just like nurse, and you go there because you want healing, you want help. And so kufanele sivulele kakhulu kulokho. Even nabazali emakhaya, uma ngabe ubona ukuthi no ingane yami is displaying behavior engayiqondisisi kahle, it's very abnormal, you open that opportunity for your child ukuthi ihambe yothola usizo as early as possible. Because like I said, one of the challenges is abantu besilisa, they tend to be diagnosed with mental illnesses very, very late because they are exposed very late. So that's basically ibaluleka kakhulu kwe-mental health empilweni zethu. Let's be open to the opportunity. Let's try and educate ourselves more about mental health disorders, mental illnesses nama-disorders, ukuze sizokwazi ukuthi no, there's something wrong with me, let me go to the right person ozongisiza. All right, and then lastly, enye into ebengifuna ukuthi ena touche kuyona, I've touched on it kancane ke kodwa, indaba yokuthi because South Africa we are facing a lot of violence towards abantu besifazane, femicide, every day abantu besifazane they are being killed, and I'm just going to highlight this again. After every 3 hours, a female or a woman dies in South Africa. Let's let that sink in. And apparently, although the stats haven't been out, this increased drastically during a lockdown, the hard lockdown. I think, again, this just shows us ukuthi indaba ye-femicide is important. So what do we do then? We educate each other. Njoba nje siba nama-talks akanjena akhuluma ngayo femicide, akhuluma ngayo mental illness, we have to do ama-prevention programs. Sihlale ndawonye and educate each other ukuthi if you're not feeling well and mhlambe emotionally kuneyinkinga, this is where you can go, this is who you can call, and uzolthola lapha usizo in order to be able to cope. Again, please let's redefine indaba ye-mental health care. Ukuthi akusikhona ukuthi umuntu usuke kukhona into embi ngaye. It's just like any other illness, and then you need help, you need an intervention. So let's educate each other. That's the first thing that we can do. Secondly, i-society fanele ipromote ama-norms nama-behaviors are healthy. Ayi ukuthi ena uma ngabe sazi ukuthi usibanibani umuntu o-violent, umuntu o-violent or umuntu abusive, sithule sihlale singenzi lutho. Sibe sazi kahle ukuthi vele kuqala kanjalo indaba yokuthi kuze kugcine sekukhona umuntu osethatha umphefumulo womunye umuntu. Let's teach each other ukuthi no, akwenziwa kanje. If kukuthi there's a disagreement, fanele nithole a healthier way of dealing with the disagreement. Umshaya umuntu akusiyona into right leyo. So kufanele lokho sigqugquzele. Bese sigqugquzela ke ne-equality. Kubantu besilisa, you don't own umuntu wesifazane. Akekho umuntu emhlabeni o-owna omunye umuntu. Whether or not unkosikazi wakho, ingane yakho, or sisi wakho, nani. Because kufanele sikupromote indaba ye-equality, kufanele sikupromote indaba yokuthi no one has a right to decide whether someone lives or dies. Ngisho ngabe kuthiwa benzeni, ngisho ngabe kuthiwa bathathe siphi isinqumo. That's why I was highlighting kakhulu ukuthi emakhaya kubalekile ukuthi mangabe sikhulisa ingane sikhulise ngendlela elinganayo, kungabi bikho omunye okuzothiwa no kufanele akhothamele omunye ngoba nakho yena igender yakhe ithi. We must promote ama values ukuthi we are equal. We must promote ama values ukuthi violence is not the solution nje emphakathini wethu. And then most importantly sengcina ngiyacela kakhulu ukuhighlighta indaba yokuthi i-mental illness si-define ngenye indlela ukuze sizogqugquzeleka ukuthi no ake ngihambe ngiyothola usizo. It's not something that's negative, i-mental illness. And the sooner we are able to redefine it, the better we are at finding usizo uma ngabe umuntu ene-mental illness. Kubalekile lokho kakhulu. And then as a field of psychology, we work under street ethics, and so sithatha kakhulu, sithatha serious i-dignity yomuntu. So if you come to me as a psychologist, as a counselor, I am bound by my ethics to keep whatever we talk about confidential. Uzohlala phakathi kwami nawe, and I must maintain i-dignity yakho, because at the end of the day, the aim is to help you, and the aim is to promote mental health. So uma ngabe ufikile kumina wathola a positive experience, I would hope that you are able to pass it on, because now we are trying to spread the information as much as we can. Because any into nje kade ngigcizelela kakhulu is we've been through a lot of trauma, And so that can contribute to how we behave, which is mostly violently. But if you are able to come and seek help with mental health care provider about that trauma, perhaps you can learn izindlela ezimbalwa zokudila naleyo trauma in a positive way. Kungaze kube into negative. Singaze sesithola sesimangala ukuthi why abantu besilisa bebulala abantu besifazane kangaka. What is the problem ngempela? How are they not handling i-anger yabo in a positive way? What is lacking? And most of the time uthola ukuthi yiyo i-access to mental health care, yiyo i-access to education. So that's one thing I'd really like to highlight kakhulu, ukuthi sifundisane, sinikeze futhi ithuba lokuthi sithole usizo kanjalo. But ke nje sengivala, ngibonge kakhulu i-invitation from Natal West Synod, and I will be accepting questions. So feel free to ask any questions. If you want clarity, you can ask, and I'll be happy to explain everything. Ngiyabonga kakhulu. That is where I end my talk. Thank you.